So glad to be here. My name is John Jacob Mubarak, and I have the great honor and privilege of being one of the directors at Rythmia, as well as an Agape licensed spiritual practitioner. I'm so grateful to be here today with you, and I'm just standing today in a deep knowing that this talk and our connection, that there's something within each of us that connects with each other deeply during this talk, and that there is a divine transmission that makes a difference for each of us, right? That something new emerges in the course of this talk. So today is the I Am the Miracle Facebook Live that we do. Typically Saturdays are a day when we do the I Got My Miracle talk, which is sharing about somebody's experience here at Rythmia. And since we have no guests at this time, we are now talking about I am the miracle, meaning that the miracle expresses in, through, and as us, that is the nature of who we are, miraculous. And so this conversation today, high mysticism, the mystical teachings, I'd like to begin a conversation about some of the high mystical teachings of the esoteric, metaphysical wisdom teachings, new thought, ancient wisdom teachings. So today's talk is on the omni nature of the divine. So one of the spiritual principles is that the nature of God is omnipresent, omniactive, omnipotent, and omniscient. Omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniactive. So I want to talk about what those are, what the difference is, like why is this a spiritual principle, and what does it mean for us in our daily lives? What does it mean? So I've begun to see a truth in a very elegant statement by a beautiful teacher, Brother Ishmael Teta from Ghana. And the Ethereal Mission is his church in Ghana. And he's an amazing teacher and spiritual leader. And he says, nature is my teacher. Simple statement, nature is my teacher. Wow, how true is that? That our connection with nature is one of the ways in which we connect with the divine. Why is that? Well, there's a theory about the fractal nature of the universe, that fractals offer infinite space, right? Infinite because a fractal has many different facets to it. And that fractal is repeated, that fractal design is repeated throughout the expression. So the divine patterns of the unified field are reflected in the patterns in nature. And that without words, without language, we see this in nature. Why do we connect in nature? Because of the fractal patterns that are speaking to the fractals within us. It's like, oh, match. And there's a connection there. And this is an expression of the omnipresent, omniactive, omniscient, and omnipotent nature of the divine. So, omni. Omni is the Latin word meaning all. Omnibus is sort of an omni means all. And it's usually used in a compound word like omnipotent. So potent is power. Omnipotent, omnipotent is all powerful. So the nature of the divine is all powerful. Well, how do we know that that's true? How do we know that that's a spiritual principle? Well, we look to see that nature is our teacher. We look to see the power of the divine expressing in nature. For nature is a divine pattern that reflects the invisible substance and influx of the divine intelligence. So we can see this in going back to the very simple idea that nature is my teacher. We can see the divine expressed in nature. It's like, remember how we used to do metal filings, or you'd get sand that had metal in it, and you'd put the sand on a piece of paper, and then you'd hold a magnet underneath the paper, and the sand or the metal filings on the paper would form a pattern. Same thing, that the force of the divine, the life force itself, the force of life itself, is that invisible force that is affecting all of visible reality. So nature is a divine pattern, a divine representation of the invisible pattern reflected out in and through its creation. So the omnipotent nature of the divine is expressed in nature. We can see the power of an energy that spins planets without human compulsion, that creates solar systems and multiverses, universes and multiverses, galaxies, universes and multiverses. This is power. Think of all the energy contained at the beginning, at a Big Bang, a point of condensation when everything was so condensed that all the energy that ever was existed in a very tightly wound point, and now is expressing. This is why the nature of the universe is, as we say in the first law of thermodynamics, energy is neither created nor destroyed, but can be transferred and conveyed into various forms. All the energy that ever existed already exists. It's already here, and it's circulating. The nature of the divine is omnipotent. All the power, all the energy that ever existed is in the nature of the divine, in the nature of this unified field, and it is expressing in its forms. It is expressing in its divine patterns represented, for example, in nature, in the mitochondria of our cells. Think of the power created in the energy creation of our cells. All of this speaks to the omnipresent nature of the divine. Hey, I just saw all these wonderful comments. I've been talking. Let me check out these comments. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all for chiming in. And the nature of the divine, as we talked about, was omnipresent and now omniscient. Or we were talking about omnipotent, all-powerful, and now omnipresent. So present everywhere. That the nature of the divine is that it is equally distributed everywhere. It's not bigger over here and lesser over there. It's not like, oh, well, he's at Rythmia, and so Rythmia, that's where all the divine is. But, out here in where I'm at in Hoboken, in Sandusky, Ohio, there's not as much. No, the divine is equally distributed. All the power, all the energy, all the love, all the beauty, equally distributed everywhere. Reverend Michael likes to say, its circumference is nowhere and its center is everywhere. So it is localized within its forms, within its expression, but it's localized everywhere. And there's no place that it is not. Now, this is an important teaching around opening up to be a receptor, to be a place for the divine to express. So imagine this unified field, this unified field of all things possible. And in this field of all things, all possibilities exist. And every idea that ever was, every idea that ever could be, every thought, everything already exists, and it's waiting to be realized, waiting to be manifested. The universe, the divine, doesn't care how it is expressed. It just wants to express. So that's why we see similar ideas popping up everywhere at different times. For example, look at all the pyramids that were built around the same time in different parts of the world, at times when we did not have travel, right? The ancient Aztecs or the Olmecs didn't check out the Egyptians. They didn't have a chance to do that. But something similar was being done on the planet because the singular source was expressing in various ways. Looks a little different in Mexico than it does in Egypt, but it's pretty much the same energy being expressed. Different expressions, different forms, one source and one energy. So the omnipresent present nature of the divine is that this unified field of energy of all things possible consciousness is looking to express itself through whichever means it can. So our job then becomes, how can I become more available? How can I become more open and available to express the divine intelligence that is seeking to be known through me and through you? This is our work in spiritual practice. It is not about deepening our practice, it's about deepening our being, deepening the way in which we understand ourselves as a divine opening for God, a divine opening for the Mother, a divine opening for this intelligence to express through. So it's not about deepening my practice, it's about deepening my being. And as I deepen my being, I then can get out of the way. I can get my own agenda out of the way. I've got my own agenda. I think it should look like this. It might look like teaching a course or writing a book. But what is the divine idea that is present everywhere? Can I catch it here? Can I catch it now? So then my work becomes, how can I open up to that truth? How can I open up to that which is seeking to express? And it has very little to do with me figuring things out and more to do with me opening up my awareness, sitting in meditation and actually seeing myself, seeing my crown chakra blossom and open. I'm just focusing my energy on that, where my attention flows, my energy goes. And if I place my attention on an awareness of my own being opening up to receive the influx of divine intelligence, then I become an opening, I become a channel for that infinite idea, that divine potentiality that exists already in the unified field to catch a ride in and as and through me. So this is one of the aspects of the divine nature, the omnipresent nature of God. Another thing that we can think about this, and another way to anchor in this truth, and to live in prayer, ceaselessly praying doesn't mean that I am going to be walking around saying, oh God, oh God, oh God, all the time. But it's an awareness. For example, if you're driving down the street and you see a car accident and an ambulance is there, do we wring our hands? Oh gosh, that looks awful. Or do we say something that acknowledges the omnipresent nature of the divine, like God is in the midst? I don't have to know anything about what's going on with that accident, but I know that if the nature of the divine is omnipresent, then God must be there, right there where they are. That is a beautiful prayer. What a beautiful prayer. God is right there. God is in the midst. The divine is in the midst. Intelligence is in the midst. Abundance is in the midst. Beauty is in the midst. Peace is in the midst. Health, wholeness, and vitality are in the midst. They're right there. They're right here, right now. How can I open up to them? Because the nature of the divine is omnipresent, everywhere present, all the time. It's omnipotent, all-powerful. We see it expressed in nature. And now we know that the nature of the divine is present everywhere, and we must make ourselves open to receive it. One of the ways we can do that is by opening up in meditation, just seeing ourselves blossom as the lotus, opening up to receive more of the divine influx. We can say it through affirmations as we walk through our day and maybe see something disparaging. Maybe we see some numbers on a news program that might be disparaging or cause concern. We say, we don't wring our hands. Oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Oh, the wheels are coming off at the hinges. God is in the midst. That's what we say. The divine is in the midst. The universal intelligence is in the midst. Right here. Become aware of it, and where we place our awareness, energy goes. And where we place our energy, where energy goes, intention flows. This is the power of our word. So there are two other omnis of God. We talked about the omnipresent and the omnipotent nature of the divine, and now the omniscient nature of the divine. All-knowing, omniscient, all-knowing. Now, an older model of understanding of the divine might place God as an individual that exists outside of me, and that being is all-knowing, all-powerful. That there's some being outside of me. Here's the truth. There is nothing outside of God, and therefore I am not outside of God, and therefore there's nothing outside of that. I can't be separate from it. So if the nature of the divine is omniscient, all-knowing, then and I am part of it, then I have access to all knowledge right now. But let's back up a few steps. How do we know that the nature of the divine is all-knowing? Well, we return again to this wonderful field of the unified field theory, right? Einstein was working on this field that says that this theory that says that the electromagnetic forces, weak and strong, etc., that at high enough energetic frequencies, they all merge into one. And isn't that? So that is the nature of the infinite pattern of intelligence that exists at the highest frequency, which is the unified field of all things possible. If every possibility exists in that field, then all knowledge exists. Every idea that ever could have been or ever will be exists in that field. So the idea of a cell phone existed 1,000,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago in the mind of man. It existed always, but in the mind of Homo sapiens, it existed, the potential for it existed. We didn't have the awareness to allow it to manifest. So the deep realization is that we have access to information beyond what our human understanding can account for right now. And when we open ourselves up to the omniscient and omnipresent nature of the divine, then we can see the omnipotent and omnipresent nature of the divine, then we can see the omniscience. We can understand that all the knowledge, all the intelligence that ever existed exists right here in the midst. Right here, I can access it. How open can I be? How out of the way can I become in order to receive this influx of divine intelligence? Because we have access to the unified field. Here's what I love about the combination of science and mysticism. It's that science is the new language of mysticism. I love that quote from Joe Dispenza, science is the new language of mysticism, because we have an ability to talk about things not seen through science, right? If I come at it to a lot of people from this mystical speaking, mystical teaching, there might be yeah, but I don't know, there's some energy, yeah, the universe is whatever. But when I can talk about it in terms of science, I have a higher access, more ability to access the listening of people. People listen bigger because we have an understanding that science somehow can take account for forces unseen. I can talk about gravity, right? I can talk about infrared, like light outside of the spectrum of visible light. I can talk about forces outside of that which I can touch, taste, feel, hear, or sense. And so the omniscient nature of the divine is that in this unified field of intelligence, all intelligence exists, all knowledge exists, all possibility exists, and I have access to it because I am one with it, because that nature is omnipresent, everywhere present. So all the intelligence is present right here. It's omnipotent, all the power, it can transcend everything. So I have access, you have access to that omniscient aspect of the divine, all powerful, all knowing, all knowledge, like accessible and available to us at all times. And finally, omni-active. So this presence, this intelligence, this power doesn't just exist in the unified field, some invisible force outside of the realm of visible intelligence or visible light. No, it's omni-active, which means that every activity is the activity of God. Every activity. That is why we can say and speak to the spiritual principle that all things are working together for my good. How can I say everything is working together for my good when I look around and see over 30 million people are unemployed? This is our job. Remember we were talking about becoming open, doing that meditation on seeing myself opening up like a lotus to receive divine wisdom and intelligence. So in the same way, the divine activity, the activity of the divine, omni-active, where can I open up to allow the activity of the divine to express through me in this situation? No matter what the circumstances are. It might look like the world's coming off, the wheels are coming off the world at the hinges, but where is my activity? The omni-active nature of the divine is that presence is active everywhere. There's nothing separate, nothing can be separate, nothing can be outside. So that brings us back to that old chestnut, why do good things happen to bad people? If God is the activity, every activity, then what about what's happening in Syria? What about what's happening now around the world? Any of the activities that might not look or appear to be what we consider the divine. The truth is that something is seeking to be expressed. The potentiality of peace exists in the Middle East, and it is waiting for an opening. How big of an opening can we make for it? How big of a landing strip for that divine idea of peace to exist, to express? So God is an activity, and it is waiting for an opening to be expressed. Just like that old metaphysical or philosophical chestnut, if a tree falls in the woods and no one is there to hear it, does it make a noise? The metaphysician would say, no, because sound is a vibration and requires a receiver to be realized. Otherwise, it's just unexpressed vibration. Unrealized vibration. It might be expressed, but there's no receiver in order for it to be fully expressed. And so in the same way, the nature of the divine is omni-active. It is like that sound wave vibrating out, waiting for a receiver so that it can be made manifest. So the nature of the divine is omni-active. Our job is to open up to receive it so that it can express through us, to get our own agenda out of the way and allow a divine idea to express. And we can lean into that divine idea because we know that the nature of the divine is omnipotent, all-powerful. It can overcome anything. Omniscient, all-knowing, all knowledge and all intelligence exists. It is omnipresent, everywhere present. There's no place, no spot that God is not. And it is omni-active, for every activity is the activity of the divine, no matter what the appearances are. And in fact, our job when we see something that looks other than divine is to become an opening for that divinity to express in that moment. We are the avatars of the divine. As Ram Dass says, we are God in drag, baby. So how can we be the RuPaul for the divine? Sachet, satay, sachet. Okay, so that is our first mystical teaching. Number one, the omni nature of the divine. So grateful to speak this word to you today and to share with you. We're going to be bringing forth more high mystical teachings over the course of the coming weeks. I look forward to sharing these with you, and I am so grateful to remind you that you are the miracle, that your life, you're just being alive at all, is a miracle. And as you anchor into that deep realization of the miraculous nature of your being, your beingness in itself, just that your heart is beating and your lungs are breathing and that you have these synapses and brain functions and everything is working, all of the systems in your body. Wow, you're a miracle. You are the miracle. Anchor into the gratitude for the miracle of your life and watch more miracles express as you open up to allow the omniscient and omni-active and omnipresent and omnipotent nature of the divine to express more fully in, through, and as you. How big of an opening can we be? That's our task this week. What do I need to do to open up more? What do I need to do to be the lotus flower, opening up to receive more of the divine wisdom, more of the divine intelligence, more of the divine beauty, more of the divine love. So grateful, so thankful, and so it is. Have a great day.